Welcome back to Switch to Linux. We're back to an almost regular schedule here, but I'm going to be busy for the next couple days, so no video for sure on Tuesday, which is typical. I don't usually do a video on Tuesday anyway. Wednesday is still completely in the air, so I figured I'd go ahead and do it now since I am actually above my regular schedule. And today I want to weigh in on the Ubuntu minimal install debate. This is actually something that first jumped up a few months ago. I want to say back in July, I think we talked about this briefly, and there is now an opinion article on OMG Ubuntu by Joey Snedden, and I want to have a look at what he says and what some of the contents say. So he says, I think Ubuntu 23.10 is making a mistake. ... The next version of the world's most popular desktop Linux operating system, that's Ubuntu for those playing dumb, comes with fewer apps available out of the box. Now, here is what he's referring to is this plan that 2023 has. This is a point release, of course, not an LTS, and their plan is in this build is to drop the minimal install option and be minimal by default, and then have the user select the packages as they would go. So the here's just the basic article. I believe we covered this whole article at one point in time, so if indeed we did, I'll go ahead and put a link to it. It's just basically Ubuntu's wants to drop the minimal and have minimal by default, and then everybody chooses the packages. Of course, the biggest downside out there about this is that this means that all of the software they want you to install that's not included is all Snap. So basically removes a lot of the rest of the core stuff from there in one fell swoop, and then relies on Snap by default because the Snap Store makes it easier to do Snap installs. Although we've even looked at the new Snap Store, and it's not as, at least in the implementation of installing it on top of an already functional Ubuntu, it did still find all the repository software, but it's unknown if that's going to happen in the 23.10 or if apt is going to be removed entirely from it. You can still install apt through the terminal, but from the store itself, the rumblings were it was going to be Snap only, but that is yet to be seen. In our initial testing we did in our video did not show that, but we were installing that on top of an already installed and functional Ubuntu system. So it is yet to be seen what exactly they're going to do. So let's move on back over to Joey's point. First thing I'm going to say is the next version of the world's most popular desktop Linux operating system is Ubuntu, by the way. And I'm not even sure that's true anymore. It is very true Ubuntu was the gateway into Linux for most people, but there is a lot less people excited about Ubuntu anymore than there used to be. I'm not going to take a lot of umbrage with that. It's just a personal opinion, talking to different people, looking at different Linux distributions. I think maybe Ubuntu might still rank one of the highest among SEO. So if you're looking for an alternative to Windows or Mac, you might land on Ubuntu. But if you actually do your research, you're probably going to be installing something else other than Ubuntu. Just because of the debates going on and everything. All right, so, but let's go ahead and leave that for now. Daily builds of 23.10 will now ship with just a super slim set of default software designed to cover basic computing needs only. For anything else, the idea is the user will fire up the software store and install what we want. And he does say in here that the new one isn't included in the daily builds yet. This is because they are still working on that new software store, which I think is the one based on Flutter, if I remember correctly. And that is the one that the early rumblings, as I said earlier here, the earlier rumblings is that will be Snap only. You can add apt as an extra option, but so it's yet to be seen. There's a lot in the air out here, so let's just make sure we're correct in what we're saying here. So an idea, as an idea, it's not without merit, but in practice, it's a potential misstep. Okay, so this is kind of where I sort of agree, depending on how they do this, and we'll explain the ways they could possibly do this at the end and what basically what that would mean for them. So basic as a feature, he says, to those new in the distro, the stock Ubuntu 23.10 basic experience is basic. They download Ubuntu 23.10, possibly trying Linux for the first time after hearing how much better of an operating system it is than Windows and Mac. Okay, I can agree. I think that Ubuntu is going to be better than Windows or Mac for the average person. Not if you need to use some specialized software or something like that, but for the average home user particularly, Ubuntu is going to be better, I mean, for sure, than using Windows or Mac. Okay, after installing it, you boot it up, and this is where some of the people in the comments down below are disagreeing. It doesn't do much out of the box as the closed source system. They can't create or edit any Office files. They can't scan documents. They can't check if their webcam works. They can't analyze disk space usage, listen to MP3s in a video, or they need to listen to MP3s in a video player, which the developer says shouldn't be used for music, and they can't even crop a photo. Now, what people said in the comments is, yeah, on Windows you can't do that either, and on Mac you can't do that either. Now, as far as it now, new Windows builds really pushes you. They generally give you that trial version of Microsoft Office and really is pushing you for that subscription model. So technically the Windows system probably can do it out of the box, but it's not something that it directly does out of the box, we should say. Right. They do not have, Windows does not have by default a document scanner. I don't remember if Mac does either. I think Windows can check if a webcam works, but I do not remember all of the odds and ends. I'm not sure if Mac does. Disk space analysis, I think Windows can do that, and I don't know. I mean, that's really part of those tools on Ubuntu. I'm not sure if they're removing all those system utility tools, because even if you look at the minimal install for Ubuntu, it still has the system utility tools. I've never thought that the minimal Ubuntu is significantly different than the full install. It doesn't have LibreOffice and like Thunderbird or something, Rhythmbox maybe, like 4-pack application packages. All right, so, but that's kind of what I remember going off. So as impressions go, it's not a good one. It's 2023. Most of us only need a web browser anyway. Some will say, you have a good point. Talk about this later. All right, but looked at sheer value proposition. Does the hyper minimalistic Mantic install provide a better end user experience, or does it give the impression of being a modern capable OS as the one that replaces it? Now, this is really interesting, and I think this might be where most of us might diverge here from Joey's opinion. And the reason here is that Windows out of the box doesn't do much, and there's a Windows software store that might have some of the software you need in it, but you still need to boot up the software store and install the things you need. Well, Ubuntu has the exact same thing. Mac has the same thing. It's hardest, I think, to install software on the Mac. They lock things down quite a bit more. Windows, they've been trying, but they realized that's kind of a losing proposition for them. They can't do that as much as they would like. Linux is overall the easiest, whether you're talking about Ubuntu with a snap-only approach or with something else that just has a whole variety of different software stores, repositories, and methodologies. You know, either or. It's really either one of those. Now it says, pick your own laps, you lazy animal. All right, so as long as I've been using Linux, I've seen people say, instead of distro shipping with a bunch of software I don't use, let me pick the software I want. Now, this is where he says it's a fundamentally good idea. I like Linux Mint in that it comes with a lot of tools that makes the system feel complete. Believe it or not, I am a geek that uses a character map. On my Endeavor OS, I had to hunt down and find the character map. Okay, it didn't come pre-installed. I manually installed the character map on that thing. Right? Now I realize I'm a rarity in that respect. That, you know, people stop shipping with character maps, that's okay, but the disk utility, the disk usage analysis, I like Linux Mint has the USB writers, USB drive formatters. They have a lot of different tools. Linux Mint out of the box feels like the most full and complete system. This is why I like it so much. Okay, it really does have the full system feel that he's talking about here. Now, could they do a minimal install and let you pick? They probably could. But Linux Mint doesn't want to focus on being the slimmed down system, or doesn't want to focus on the experienced user coming in with configuring their perfect system out of the box. They really want the system to work the best for the most people with the minimal amount of pushback. And Ubuntu seems to be diverging from that a little bit in this respect, because it's good that they're not installing a bunch of software. Like if you hate Thunderbird and you don't want it and they install Thunderbird, you have to uninstall Thunderbird and install what you want. And the same thing goes if it's Geary, if it goes with Evolution. The web browsers are the same way. The music apps are the same way. And we all have our favorite applications. Now, those of us who are seasoned Linux users have our own favorite applications. We can spin up a minimal install of something and then simply add the software that we would like. But the problem here is that a brand new user doesn't necessarily recognize that the software in Linux might be different. The web browsers are generally the same. Email, it depends on what you've been using, and Office tools, certainly quite a bit different. The question is, are they doing this in an appropriate way or not? And we have not yet seen what they're trying to do in this respect. And so because of that, we're still speculating. We don't know if this new Ubuntu minimal system with the Ubuntu software store is going to allow us to install with apt or just snap. We don't know that yet, which is kind of frightening because it's kind of coming down the road pretty quick. And we really don't know all these things yet. The question is, how are they going to do this? If they're going to give us a distribution without any software and just say, boot up the software store, have fun, that is a fundamental mistake, because people will not know, particularly new users to Linux, they will not know what degree of software you need as you're navigating through everything. All right, that is a fundamental principle. Now, if they are doing an approach that boots up and they put something in their installer that says, hey, do you need a web browser? Choose one of these. Do you need an email client? Choose one of these. Do you need an Office suite? Choose one of these. Would you like system utilities? Here's a list of system utilities. Kind of like what Debian does on their build installer. You can select the specific software. MX Linux, their tool makes it easier to find the categories. The software store that the Snap Store Ubuntu ships with is not as easy to find the software that you need. And it's not always as inherent. The question becomes is, how are they going to implement this? If they're going to give us lists of things that we want to work with, then for sure, what we're going to see is we're going to see a case where it's an easy, it's a good plan to say, we're giving it to you with the minimal download, minimal install time, and then here's a list of regular software. That would be a good idea. If they give it to you as all minimal and then, hey, boot up the software store to install your favorite software, they're shooting their new users in the foot. And that's, I think, is what he is getting at here in this article. And if that is what he's getting at in its fundamental level, I completely agree. To wipe out the apps and just say, boot up the Snap Store and start installing stuff is a bad approach. But if you're going to say, hey, there's tools available, here's lists of good web browsers, here's lists of good Office suite, these are the things that will help us the most. So, he talks in here about opinionated software choices. You're never going to have the perfect distribution that's going to make everybody happy. I mean, if you come up with the perfect distribution, you release it, you're going to have people like me boot it up and complain about it because, that's what we do, right? I mean, we talk about the pros, we talk about the cons, and sometimes the software decisions aren't the things that we might want to use. And that's perfectly okay. That is all that is good subjective content to suggest, hey, I don't like this particular application, let's use this one instead for that. Okay, that is the type of pure subjectivity I'm 100% on board with, because it's a matter of personal choice and what you need, things like that. So, and he is right in saying that opinions about which software should be installed are at the center of this. And so if Ubuntu pulls out all of the software and lets you choose the ones to install, that's great, provided your users know what to install. It's not great if you just give them a software store and say, hey, start installing stuff that you want. Like, I don't know. That's what's going to happen. To me, a considered and comprehensive set of software suite is part of what makes a desktop Linux distro, giving new users complete, fully functional desktop OS in a single download. I have no doubt what helped make Ubuntu the juggernaut it is today. I completely agree with this. So I am not necessarily on the pure minimalist train. I like Linux Mint for that. It makes me wonder, maybe this gentleman should switch to Linux Mint. Because it does feel like a full Office suite. You can install Linux Mint and once you install Linux Mint, it can do effectively everything you need it to do. Very good. So unless people are returning to Dell Ubuntu laptops or reinstalling Windows because they can't cope with Thunderbird or Simple Scan being on their systems, which we all know is unlikely, the decision to remove useful apps for everyone seems off. And that's where I kind of disagree with them because, you know, Windows doesn't do any of that by default. Windows, I don't even think has its own default mail app anymore. Don't you have to use the Outlook? I don't know, though. You forgive me if that's wrong because I don't use Windows, haven't used Windows for a number of years now. So the reality is, though, is that I believe Windows did take out the mail application. Windows does not have a native scanning application. You need software for all this kind of stuff. Ubuntu, if they take those system utilities out, yeah, that's probably a mistake. But I don't know. We'll see. Will new users know what apps they need? This is what I was getting at there. It's easy to install apps on Ubuntu, of course. And though the new Flutter-based software store is targeted to land in 2310, it lacks FlatHub support. Actually, aggressively stands against FlatHub support. They've explicitly blocked FlatHub not only from Ubuntu but from the official community builds as well because it competes with Snap and they want everybody using their proprietary packaging system. Yeah, so it doesn't in testing builds give greatly improve app discoverability. Apparently, I am reading at a 5th grade level now. Okay, so that should make it easier for new users faced with minimal Mantic that it doesn't do too much to get their system up to speed, but to do average users, the kind who make up a fair chunk of Ubuntu desktop 6 million strong user base, want to go through the hassle of having to hunt for apps to do basic things as crop the as an image scan or scan a document. Again, it's yet to be seen because if I remember correctly, the minimal Ubuntu does actually still have the document scanner. I could be wrong about that. Let me know, though, for sure. It's been a while since I've done it. Obviously, it does not include Office stuff, but neither does Microsoft without the free trial to the subscription. Plus, the Choose Your Own Apps adventure not only assumes everyone's game to play, but that everyone knows which apps they need. And I 100% agree with him on this point here, that if you're just dropping in to say, hey, here's the software store, if you're just giving us another line item in your first Ubuntu, oh, your location server, oh, would you like to send your data? Oh, just boot up the software store to install the software you want. If that's all you're giving them, that's a big mistake. But if you're giving them a more comprehensive list of things and explain what category they are, as some distributions do, that is a positive thing. So we really need to see how they're going to implement this, and they're only down to like 2 months yet. We'll see if we figured it out. Mainly installing 12 different Office suites to find out which one is the best does sound like a fun way to spend an afternoon, but when all you need is to open a docx, your boss emailed you, less fun. Ubuntu as a distro is famed for being new user friendly, remember, and I'm not sure if it is anymore. You know, I think that this gentleman might be a little stuck in the past. I think that Ubuntu has moved beyond that. There's been a lot of fighting and discussions about it. Ubuntu has been falling in the ratings and the rankings, and some people are moving towards other distributions now by default. So that's kind of good. Internet is everywhere. I never use LibreOffice, Thunderbird, Rhythmbox, Shotwell. They say shouldn't be included, so it's a common refrain among existing users, but your preference is your preference the best preferences for everyone. A lot of us now use webmail, use Google Docs, etc. and stream music and share photos directly from our phones rather than our desktops, and that's, in my opinion, a problem with our modern world. We need to get back to a time when we are doing things manually on our system rather than relying on these big tech services. And that's what Switch to Linux is about, is relying on these things yourself, because if these things go down, if Google decides you've engaged in wrongthink, or if those streaming services decide that your favorite band just said something that's against the popular narrative, and so now they're banned from your streaming service, I'm sorry, I just don't want to lose that stuff over the weird world that we currently live in. But crafting a desktop experience that assumes we all do those things to a degree, assumes we should do those things, overlooks those who don't or want to. Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. Cliche reference, though, it is, but there are parts of the world where the internet... Is it me, or is this article badly edited? Or should I say poorly edited? Badly edited, yes. Is it just me? When people download Ubuntu 23.04 or below, they get an OS that can do everything Windows 95 can do, and majority of it offline. Okay, I will probably agree with that. The problem is Windows 95, if you haven't noticed, this is 2023. 95 was 30 years ago. Okay, so any computer in the last decade or more doesn't have these same features. Remember, it was Windows 7, I believe, that removed the DVD codec, so you have to buy a software package to play DVDs. Just a thought. With Ubuntu 23, they don't, just like Windows 7 and later. They do get an ISO that's not a few hundred megabytes smaller, but it's a lot less useful. I mean, I think that the size of the Ubuntu ISO creep has been massive. When I first started using Linux as a daily, day-to-day basis, which was back in 2016, I think Ubuntu was just under 2 gig, and now it's like over 4. Why? Really? Why? And then they talk about free software is important as existential or whatever ideological-based anxiety is also linked to all of this. If leading Linux distros no longer feel they have to put free software front and center, who will? Will new users ever hear, learn, or use them? Won't they just flock to familiar brands or only discover Linux-supported software backed by large marketing budgets? Yeah, and I agree with that. And this is actually why I like distro hopping and why I like that different people put different software for things. Like we looked at Rhino the other day, has VS Codium. Curious. I kind of wanted to play around with VS Codium. Knowing that I have a VS Codium on my GNOME box's distribution allows me to play around with it without installing it on my system. And when I'm done playing around with it, I can either install it on my main system or I can just drop it. Who knows? Just kill the VM so I can spin up something else. Providing privacy, respecting functional, not always flashy offline capability alternatives to cloud-based proprietary vendor locked-in tools feels more important today than it ever has. I agree, but I don't think that has anything to do with Ubuntu's move here. Not only for those who don't have 24/7 web access, but for those who use older machines and can't run increasingly bloated web-based tools as well. Yeah, I agree with that. Too many web-based things are becoming too crazy. Of course, they already have a minimal install, which we talked about briefly. And this gentleman here says he is unconvinced, but he provides us a little bit of optimism. If there's a saving grace in all this, that most Ubuntu users stick to LTS versions, they're unlikely to download 2310. They won't be affected by this minimal experiment. But a new LTS is on the horizon. My hope is the minimal install drawbacks Mantic makes are addressed during the next development cycle to ensure the needs of all new and existing users. So, few thoughts and compromises and mitigation ideas. A first run wizard showing them install recommended software button. That is good as long as it's not like just do this and install the recommended software that we've been installing for years. It completely defeats the purpose. I mean, we've always had the minimal or the non. I mean, his suggestion here is just going with the full install. But if you're going to say show recommended software, to say here is the software in these different categories, like email clients, here's a list. Web browsers, here's a list. Photo editors, here's a list. This is the best way to approach it. He says a full installation option in the installer. That's what we have that they're getting rid of. And a dialogue to guide new users in trying to open files without supported app installed. I think pretty much any distro could do with something like that. Commitment to showcase, promote FOSS apps in the new software store. Good luck with that. They're pushing this based on their own corporate agenda, not based upon free and open source software. If they want to talk about free and open source software, they would not be pushing a proprietary software repository on us all anyway. Just a thought. So in his summary, I agree Ubuntu's pre-existing software choices are stale. I bleated about it for years, and I accept that we live in an era dominated by and largely proprietary locked-in web-based services, but I think the way to address these factors could be more thoughtful than this. I'll have no doubt once again be labeled a hater for sharing my disquiet, but so be it. I have been using Ubuntu for as long as I've been doing this blog, and now as my concerns, I've come with well-intentioned place. Ubuntu is special. I want it to remain so. All right. So that's kind of what his thoughts are. In general, I kind of agree with his ideology. I think it really hinges on two major factors. The first major factor is what software is in this new store that is not even yet out in the daily builds, apparently, unless it's just got there since this article was published. Because there was speculation floating around that by default, apt packages were not going to be in there. And if apt packages are not going to be in there, and all this is a front end for their proprietary base snap system, which, to be clear, if you're new around here or you're just looking to prove me wrong in every possible area, I know some of you guys are out there to do that. If that is the case, yes, the snap software themselves are open source, but the distribution method is not, and that raises a few red flags. Which that in and of itself is what opens it up to the possibility of a man-in-the-middle attack. You understand? Among other issues. So if their software store only includes the snap packages, now we are dependent on the big corporate partners that Ubuntu has worked with to get those snap packages pushed. Remember that according to Snapcraft, they rely not on the security of the code by auditing it, but on the trusted people that develop the code. And then they list Microsoft and Facebook and Spotify among those people. Those are companies a lot of us have moved to Linux to avoid. And so that raises in of itself a serious problem. Now, the second factor is, are they going to just say install the regular software or just boot up the software store and, hey, search up what you want? Or are they going to give us lists of software? The best thing they could do is they could give us another tool like MX Linux has or some other distributions that's very easy. Here's a list of your 3 or 4 most common web browsers, your most common email clients, your most common Office suite. Here's various system utilities. Select the ones that you want and install those on the install or as that first step after it's done. If that's the methodology they use, I'm completely on board. But I do agree if they're just pulling it out and saying, here's a software store, that is a problem. So those are my thoughts about this. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.